Get out!
Revenge Files with Nora. File 10. Lauren, they said I was too old to matter, that my methods were outdated, that the future belonged to someone younger, hungrier, more connected. And to make it worse, 24 hours before my retirement, the CEO replaced me with his 25-year-old nephew, a kid who couldn't spell procurement without autocorrect. But there was one thing they didn't account for. Although they thought removing me would be seamless, they forgot one crucial thing. I had built the authentication protocol that controlled the $115 million defense contracts, a system that was still in effect, and that system only responded to one voice. Mine. Here's what happened next. My name is Lauren Gallagher. For 26 years, I served as Senior Director of Strategic Contracts at Bastion Defense, one of the largest defense contractors on the East Coast. I started as a junior analyst, fresh out of Columbia with a finance degree and a chip on my shoulder. Back then, Bastion was a mid-sized firm struggling to compete with the giants. I watched it grow. I helped it grow. In fact, I can say my fingerprints were on every step of their growth, because I was there for every major contract, every international negotiation, every late-night call with Pentagon liaisons. The Manhattan skyline outside my office window had changed many times over the years. Buildings changed, rose and fell. Colleagues came and went. CEOs cycled through like seasons. What didn't change was me. I stayed there. I was like the institutional memory. The woman who knew where every contract was kept, that every handshake was documented, every promise kept or broken. After 26 years of thinking I had seen everything, suddenly everything accelerated. Richard Hartwell became CEO 3 years ago. Harvard MBA, private equity background, but zero experience in defense contracting. The board loved him because he was a Harvard MBA graduate. Plus, he used trendy words and wore expensive suits. Synergy, disruptive, lean forward. Words that meant nothing when you were sitting across from a 4-star general negotiating satellite access rights. You can judge me for that, but yes, that's how I see it. I tolerated him because the work mattered more than my ego. For example, the Keystone Federal Systems contract, worth $115 million. I had devoted my final year at Bastion to this contract. 9 months of negotiations, 4 international trips, countless sleepless nights reviewing compliance clauses and security protocols. Another year lost from my life that I dedicated to my work. But I valued my work and what I achieved. The deal was historic. Keystone was the largest government aviation logistics provider in North America, and this contract would cement Bastion's position for the next decade. I had built the relationship from scratch, starting with a cold introduction at a procurement conference in Geneva 4 years earlier. Nathan Calloway, Keystone's senior procurement director, had become someone close to a friend. We even had deep conversations about life. We had survived a 12-hour negotiation in Brussels during a transit strike. We had argued over delivery timelines during a global supply chain crisis. We had earned each other's trust the old-fashioned way, through competence and consistency. The final authorization was scheduled for 5 p.m. on my last day. Poetic, I thought. A fitting end to a career defined by closing impossible deals. Everything could have ended like this, and I wouldn't have had an extraordinary story to tell you. But Richard had other plans, and I was about to find out very soon. The morning of my final day started like any other. But of course, for me it was different and special from the others. I can say there was a happy flutter inside me. An important page in my life was about to close, and I was happy that I had made it this far safely. You may have experienced this feeling too. The peace and comfort that comes from working honestly and doing the best I can. I arrived at 7:30, coffee in hand, to review the transmission protocols one last time. The secure gateway system I had designed 6 months earlier sat ready on my monitor, cursor blinking patiently beside the biometric confirmation field. That system was my insurance policy. After a near breach the previous year, I had convinced the former CTO to let me build a proprietary authentication layer, voice ID, terminal lock, geolocation match. The contract could only be executed from my machine, in my office, with my voice. Not because I was paranoid, because I understood that security meant nothing without accountability. The office floor was quiet. Most of the staff wouldn't arrive until 9. I liked these early hours, the stillness before the chaos, the time to think without interruption. Do you know that feeling? My desk held 26 years of accumulated memories, a worn leather notebook filled with client notes, a framed certificate from a procurement summit in Zurich, a photo from the first executive team, back when we all believed we were building something meaningful. There was a small plant on the corner, a gift from my assistant 5 years ago. She had moved to Seattle, but the plant survived. Don't laugh, but I had named him Herbert. The fact that I had kept Herbert alive, even grown him enough to need a bigger pot, was a miracle. That's why he meant so much to me, and soon we were both going home, never to return. We had both earned our retirement. At 8:45, my watch buzzed. A calendar reminder. Leadership transition meeting. Conference room A, 9:00 a.m. I frowned. There was no leadership transition on my calendar. I was the leadership at least for 8 more hours. I walked toward conference room A, heels clicking against the marble floor. The executive wing smelled of fresh coffee and something else, something unfamiliar. Cologne, maybe, too expensive and too aggressive, like a warning. Richard Hartwell was already inside, seated at the head of the table. His posture was too casual, legs crossed, fingers drumming against the armrest. Behind him stood a young man I didn't recognize. He was tall, maybe 6'2", wearing a slim-fit navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. His hair was styled with the kind of precision that required professional assistance. He held a tablet like a shield, screen facing outward, as if it contained the secrets of the universe. "Lauren," Richard said, not standing. "Come in. This won't take long." I remained at the door. "What's this about?" Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We're implementing a leadership transition. Effective immediately." I blinked. "Immediately? I'm retiring at 5 today. The Keystone authorization is scheduled for." He waved his hand dismissively. "You've done more than enough." He gestured toward the young man. "This is Spencer. He'll be handling the final stages." Spencer stepped forward, extending his hand with the enthusiasm of someone who had never been told no. "Lauren, it's such an honor. I've heard so much about your work." I stared at his hand without taking it. "Spencer who?" Richard's jaw tightened slightly. "Spencer Hartwell, my nephew. He's been shadowing our digital strategy team for the past 3 months. I've decided he's ready for a leadership role." I looked between them, processing the words. "Your nephew, 3 months of shadowing, and you want him to authorize a $115 million defense contract." Spencer's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "I've been preparing extensively." The documentation looks straightforward. Documentation, as if 9 months of relationship building could be reduced to a PDF. Richard stood, buttoning his jacket. "Security will assist with your transition. Your belongings will be delivered to your residence by end of day." I felt the floor shift beneath me. 26 years. Reduced to a 10-minute meeting and a box of belongings sent by courier. "You can't do this," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake inside me. "The Keystone contract requires specific authorization protocols. The client expects continuity." Can you believe I was still thinking about the company and the clients? That's just who I was. Richard's expression hardened. "The client expects results. Spencer will deliver them." I looked at Spencer, really looked at him. He was 25, young enough to be my son. Young enough to have never negotiated anything more complex than a bar tab. "Do you know who Nathan Calloway is?" I asked quietly. Spencer's brow furrowed. "The Keystone contact, of course. He's the, procurement lead. Senior procurement director," I corrected. "Do you know his daughter's name? His wife's anniversary? Do you know he takes his coffee black but pretends to add cream because he thinks it makes him seem more approachable?" Spencer's mouth opened, then closed. "That's what I thought." Richard stepped between us. "These are unnecessary and meaningless details, Lauren. We're running a business here. This conversation is over." "Spencer, please escort Lauren to her office to collect her things." I didn't move, not yet. My voice was ice. "Richard, the authorization system requires biometric confirmation from the origin terminal." "My terminal, my voice. Without that, the contract cannot be executed." He paused, and for the first time, something like uncertainty flickered across his face. "What do you mean?" "I mean the system I designed, the one you signed off on 6 months ago, requires my physical presence and vocal authentication. It can't be overridden, it can't be transferred, it can't be faked." Spencer looked at his uncle. "That can't be right." IT can just reassign the credentials. I almost laughed. Go ahead. Ask them. Richard's phone was already out. He typed furiously, then held it to his ear. Brent, conference room A now. We waited in silence. Spencer shifted his weight from foot to foot. Richard stared at his phone like it had personally betrayed him. When the IT director arrived, his face was already pale. He had been with Bastion for 8 years. He knew exactly what I had built. Mr. Hartwell, Brent said carefully. The Gateway Final Protocol is environment-specific. It requires Miss Gallagher's original workstation, her registered vocal signature, and geolocation confirmation. We can't bypass it without corrupting the entire contract log. Richard's voice dropped. Find a way. There is no way, Brent said. Not without starting from scratch. And that would take weeks. The client would have to re-authenticate everything on their end. The room fell silent. I straightened my blazer. Congratulations, Spencer. I hope you know what you're walking into. Then I turned and walked out without looking back. The cursor on my monitor kept blinking, waiting for a voice it would never hear from Spencer Hartwell. I didn't expect a parade. I hadn't expected balloons or cake or a standing ovation. But I had expected something. A card, maybe. A handshake. A quiet thank you in the hallway. Instead, I got a cardboard box and a security escort. The walk to my office never seemed to end. Maybe at times like these the road really does get longer. What do you think? My heels echoed against the floor, each step heavier than the last. The junior staff avoided eye contact. I noticed someone pretending to be on a call. Others remembered tasks they had postponed and typed frantically at their keyboards. These were the same people who had come to me for advice, for mentorship, for career guidance. Now they couldn't lift their heads. I understood. Fear is a powerful motivator. They had families, mortgages, ambitions. They couldn't afford to be seen sympathizing with yesterday's news. My office door was already open. Someone had placed a cardboard box on my chair. Efficient. Cold. No label. No note. I began to pack. The leather notebook. The Zurich certificate. The photo from the early days. Herbert, my beautiful plant whose species I never figured out but somehow managed to keep alive. Things that mattered only to me. Then I noticed it. My nameplate was gone. The glass wall outside my office, where it had once read Lauren Gallagher, Senior Director of Strategic Contracts, now displayed something new. Spencer Hartwell, Director of Innovation Partnerships. Innovation Partnerships. They had erased 26 years and replaced it with a title that sounded like a LinkedIn buzzword generator. I sat down one last time in my chair and logged into my workstation. The Gateway Final system blinked on my screen, patient and undisturbed. I had the opportunity to do many things, but I didn't delete anything that would hurt the company. That wasn't who I was. I had gotten this far with my honesty. I had no intention of taking a step that would change this from now on. But I cleared out every personal document, every training material I had written, every template I had created over the years. None of it mattered. I had copies of everything important. Every contract summary, every negotiation timeline, every client profile. All of it organized in my personal Notion workspace, synchronized and secure. What I left untouched was the biometric authentication protocol. The system that housed the final verification layer for the $115 million contract. It couldn't be accessed remotely. It couldn't be overridden without a complete system teardown, and it couldn't recognize anyone's voice but mine. As I shut down the monitor, an email notification appeared. Subject: Congratulations to Spencer. I clicked it open. Please join us in celebrating Spencer Hartwell's promotion to Director of Innovation Partnerships. His fresh perspective and dynamic energy will lead Bastion into an exciting new era of growth. They had CC'd the entire company, including me. Can you believe that? I closed the email without responding. What would I say? That watching someone parade around in my title, my office, my work, felt like being erased in slow motion. I sealed the box and stood. The security guard waiting outside my door was young, maybe 25. He looked uncomfortable. Ready, Miss Gallagher? I nodded. One more thing. I walked back to my desk and picked up Herbert, who had survived 5 years of fluorescent light, computer humming, and sporadic watering. Now I'm ready. The elevator ride down felt endless, 47 floors of silence. The security guard stared at his shoes. I stared at the city lights through the glass walls. When the doors opened to the lobby, I walked out without looking back. The marble floors reflected the evening sky. Outside, Manhattan hummed with indifference. I stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, breathing in the autumn air. The city didn't care that I had just lost everything I had built. It kept moving, lights flickering, taxis honking, people rushing toward destinations that mattered only to them. I hailed a cab and gave the driver my address. As we pulled away, I caught one last glimpse of the Bastion Defense logo glowing on the building's facade. The same logo I had helped design 20 years ago. They thought this was the end of my story. They had no idea what was waiting for them on Monday morning. The weekend passed in a blur of contradictions. Saturday morning, I woke at 6 a.m. out of habit, reached for my phone to check emails, then remembered there were no emails to check and laughed at myself. No urgent messages, no client calls, no system alerts, just silence. Under different circumstances, this could be a good thing, I thought. I needed the silence too, but my mind wouldn't stop. My apartment in the Upper East Side felt different. Smaller, somehow. For 26 years, it had been the place I slept between work. Now it was just a place. I made coffee the way I always did. Black, no sugar. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the steam rising from the mug. My hands weren't shaking. My breathing was steady, but something inside me was shifting. A cold, quiet clarity replacing the initial shock. They had called me redundant, replaceable, an obstacle to their vision. They were about to learn the cost of that miscalculation. Let's just say karma was about to get involved. By Saturday afternoon, my phone had buzzed 3 times. The first was from my sister in Connecticut, asking if I wanted to come for dinner. The second was from Nathan Calloway at Keystone with a simple message: heard rumors, call when you can. The third was from someone I hadn't expected. A text from Brent, the IT director. Lauren, did you know the Gateway Final Protocol is rejecting everything Spencer tries? They're panicking. Richard is furious. No one can figure out what to do. I read the message twice. Then I set the phone down and finished my coffee. Of course they were panicking. The system was doing exactly what I had designed it to do. It was waiting for me, and I had no intention of answering. Sunday evening, I received one final message. This one from Nathan Calloway directly. Lauren, the contract is stalled. Keystone is asking questions. No one at Bastion will explain what's happening. I'm concerned. Please call me when you can. I stared at his words for a long time. Part of me wanted to explain everything. To tell him how I had been humiliated, erased, replaced by a child who couldn't pronounce the company name correctly. But another part of me, the part that had spent 26 years building systems and protecting them, knew better. I typed a simple reply. I'm no longer with Bastion. I wish I could say more, but you may want to review the final authorization clause on page 38. Then I set down my phone and walked to the window. The city glittered beneath me. Somewhere in Midtown, Richard Hartwell was probably pacing his corner office, barking orders at people who couldn't help him. And Spencer was probably staring at a blinking cursor, wondering why the system wouldn't respond to his voice. They had wanted a future without me. Now they had it. Monday morning arrived with pale autumn light filtering through my apartment windows. I made coffee the same way I had for decades, black and strong, but this time I sat at my kitchen table instead of rushing to catch the 7:15 train. For the first time in 26 years, I had nowhere to be. No meetings, no calls, no urgent emails demanding immediate attention. The silence should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt like the calm before a storm I had engineered without fully intending to. At 8:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. A news alert from one of the industry trade publications I still followed. Breaking. Bastion Defense faces internal security crisis. $115 million government contract stalled due to authentication failure. I read the headline 3 times, then I opened the article. Sources close to the matter indicate that Bastion's recently announced leadership transition has resulted in an unexpected technical obstacle. The company's proprietary security protocols are preventing the finalization of a major defense contract with Keystone Federal Systems. They had tried to keep it quiet, but they had failed. The information had leaked once. By 9:30, my inbox was flooded with messages. Messages from former colleagues, messages from industry contacts, even a few journalists trying to get comments. I thought it was interesting to see this much demand after living quietly, and I ignored them all except one, Because what I needed wasn't crowds, it was to be understood. Nathan Calloway. His message was brief. Lauren, we need to talk, not as client and vendor. As professionals who respect each other. Please call me. I poured another cup of coffee and dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. Lauren, thank you for calling. Nathan. I kept my voice neutral. How can I help? There was a pause. The kind that happens when someone is choosing their words carefully. I've been with Keystone for 18 years, he said. I've seen a lot of transitions, a lot of leadership changes, but I've never seen anything like what's happening at Bastion right now. I said nothing. Let him continue. They're telling us it's a technical issue, a temporary setback. But the contract authentication is rejecting everything they submit, and they won't explain why. That's concerning. Another pause. Lauren, did you design the authentication protocol for this contract? I did, and it requires your specific authorization to complete. I stared out the window at the city below. The same city I had served for 26 years. The same city that had just discarded me like yesterday's newspaper. Yes, I said finally. It does. Nathan exhaled slowly. Then they have a significant problem. They do. Is there anything you can do to help them? I considered the question. The same question I had been asking myself for 3 days. There's a lot I could do, Nathan. The question is whether I should. He was quiet for a moment. I understand, he said. Off the record, if I were in your position, I'd be asking the same thing. What about you? Would you be willing to help if you were in my shoes? We spoke for another 20 minutes. He told me about the chaos at Bastion. Spencer's failed attempts to override the system. Richard's increasingly desperate calls to the board. The rumors spreading through the industry about leadership dysfunction. And he told me something else. Keystone is reconsidering the partnership, he said, not because of the technical issues, because of how Bastion handled your departure. The board doesn't trust organizations that treat institutional knowledge as disposable. I felt something shift inside me, not satisfaction, something quieter. Vindication, maybe? What happens next? I asked. That depends on you, Nathan said. If you're willing to help resolve this, we can find a path forward. If not, Keystone will likely terminate the contract and pursue other vendors. I thought about it. 26 years of work, 9 months of negotiations, $100 million hanging in the balance, and a CEO who had humiliated me in front of his nephew. I'll think about it, I said. That's all I'm asking. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. They had tried to erase me, to reduce 26 years of expertise to a single afternoon's transition, to replace institutional knowledge with nepotism and buzzwords. But systems don't forget their architects, and this system was still waiting for my voice. The question was whether I would give it. Tuesday morning, the situation escalated dramatically. I learned about it not from Bastion, but from the news. A story in one of the major business publications, complete with anonymous sources and damning quotes. Bastion Defense leadership crisis deepens. CEO's nephew at center of contract failure. The article detailed everything. Spencer's appointment, my abrupt departure, the authentication protocol that couldn't be bypassed, the growing concern from clients and shareholders. There was even a quote from an unnamed board member. We're conducting an internal review of the leadership decisions that led to this situation. By noon, Bastion's stock had dropped 7%. By 2 p.m., my phone rang again. This time, it was a number I recognized. Richard Hartwell's direct line. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Lauren, his voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. Richard, there's been a misunderstanding, he said, about the transition, about how it was handled. He cleared his throat. The board has asked me to reach out, to discuss a resolution. I walked to my window and looked out at the city. What kind of resolution? We need you to authorize the contract. Complete the final verification. Once that's done, we can discuss appropriate compensation for any inconvenience. Inconvenience. I almost laughed. You're greatly underestimating the situation. You removed me from a contract I spent 9 months building. You replaced me with your nephew. You erased my nameplate before I even left the building. And you're calling it an inconvenience. Silence on the other end. Lauren, he said finally, this isn't personal, it's business. No, Richard. For you, it's business. For me, it was 26 years of my life. More silence. What do you want? He asked. I thought about it. What did I want? Not revenge. Revenge would be petty. Revenge would mean I was still defined by what they had done to me. What I wanted was something different. something that would transform this ending into a beginning that would lift me higher than where I had been. A plan immediately formed in my mind. "I'll meet with you," I said, "but not at Bastion, and not alone. My attorney will be present." He hesitated. "Fine. When?" "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Send me a location." I hung up before he could respond. Then I called my attorney, Catherine Aldridge. We had known each other for 15 years. She had handled my contracts, my estate planning, my occasional consulting agreements. Now she was going to handle something else entirely. Wednesday morning, I arrived at Catherine's office in Midtown 20 minutes early. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, the kind of view that made powerful people feel small. I wore a charcoal blazer over a cream blouse, professional, composed, a combination I had chosen deliberately, not a trace of the chaos I had felt a week earlier. Richard arrived at 10:02 a.m., 2 minutes late. A power move, probably. It backfired. He looked older than he had a week ago. The confident swagger was gone. In its place was something closer to desperation. Dark circles under his eyes, a tie that wasn't quite straight. I was seeing his weakest version to date. "Lauren," he said, extending his hand. I didn't take it. He didn't deserve it. I gestured to a chair instead. "Please sit, Richard." Catherine sat to my left, a stack of documents arranged neatly in front of her. She was petite, silver-haired, with the kind of calm intensity that made opposing counsel nervous. "Mr. Hartwell," she began, "thank you for meeting with us. I trust you understand the situation." Richard shifted in his seat. "The board wants this resolved quickly." "I'm sure they do," Catherine said. "The current circumstances have been rather public." She slid a document across the table. Richard glanced at it, then looked up sharply. "What is this?" "A proposal," I said, "for resolving the current situation." He read through it slowly. His face changed colors twice. First red, then pale. "This is extortion." "It's compensation," Catherine corrected, "for the abrupt termination of Miss Gallagher's employment, the public humiliation she endured, and the ongoing value of her expertise in resolving this crisis." Richard looked at me. "You want a public statement acknowledging your contributions?" "I want the truth," I said. "The truth that you tried to bury when you replaced me with your nephew. And compensation, appropriate to the value of my work, and a consulting fee for resolving the current situation." He was quiet for a long moment. The room felt smaller than it had before. "The board won't agree to this. Then the board will explain to shareholders why they lost a $115 million contract," Catherine said, "along with the reputational damage, the stock decline, and the ongoing leadership questions." Richard stood abruptly. "I need to speak with our legal team." "Of course," I said. "Take your time. The system will wait." He left without shaking hands. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Catherine turned to me. "He'll be back, I know." She smiled slightly. "You're enjoying this." I considered the question. "No," I said finally, "but I'm not suffering either. A kind of numbness, emotionless, and after what they did, that feels like progress. If you've ever felt this way, you know exactly what I mean." Richard called Thursday morning. His voice was different. Softer. Defeated. Taking a deep breath, he said, "We accept your terms." I wasn't surprised. The stock had dropped another 4% overnight. The board was demanding answers, and Keystone had officially put the contract on hold pending resolution. I authorized the contract that afternoon from a neutral location using a secure connection Catherine's firm had arranged. The system recognized my voice immediately. The verification completed in seconds. 26 years of work, finalized with a single sentence. The funds transferred. The press release went out. Bastion's stock began to recover. But that wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. 2 weeks later, Nathan Calloway called with an offer that changed everything. "Keystone wants to retain you," he said, "as an independent consultant, not tied to any vendor, working directly with our internal team." I sat in silence for a moment, processing what he was saying. "The compensation package," he continued, "is substantial. 5 times what Bastion was paying you, and the flexibility is complete. You set your hours, your terms, your projects." I thought about it. 26 years at one company. All that expertise, all that knowledge, all those relationships. And now, an opportunity to use it entirely on my own terms. "Why me?" I asked. "After everything that happened?" Nathan laughed softly. "Because of everything that happened. You built a system that protected a $115 million contract even when the people in charge tried to bypass it. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. I continued watching the city's movement from my window, the same city I had navigated for 26 years. The same streets, the same buildings, the same relentless energy. But something was different now. I was different. And this difference that came after 26 years, I liked it. Send me the contract, I said. I signed it 3 days later. Within 3 months, I had built a consulting practice beyond anything I had imagined. 4 major clients. Over $2 million in annual contracts, working from my apartment, setting my own schedule, choosing my own projects. With my dear Herbert by my side, of course. The irony wasn't lost on me. Bastion remained one of my clients, not because they wanted to, but because Keystone required it as a condition of the renewed contract. Every month, Richard Hartwell signed a check with my name on it. Spencer Hartwell was quietly reassigned to a different department. Internal communications, from what I heard, far from any client-facing work. The nameplate outside my old office was removed entirely, no replacement. Richard Hartwell stepped down as CEO 6 months later. The board cited performance concerns and a need for new direction. The real reason was obvious to anyone paying attention. His nephew had cost them more than a contract. He had cost them credibility. And me, I was exactly where I had always belonged. Not in an office with my name on the door, not waiting for permission from people who didn't understand what I had built. I was independent, thriving, transformed by the very circumstances that were supposed to destroy me. The view from my apartment window looked different now. Not smaller, bigger, full of possibility. Here's what I learned from all of this. Never let someone else define your ending. They called me redundant. They said the future belonged to someone younger. They thought removing me would be seamless, painless, invisible. But the only person who gets to decide when your story ends is you. And I decided my story was just beginning. The ending they wrote for me became the first chapter of something better. My name is Lauren Gallagher. I spent 26 years building a career at a company that tried to erase me in an afternoon. They failed, not because I sabotaged them, not because I sought revenge, but because expertise doesn't need permission. It just needs proof. And I had spent 26 years building the proof. Now I work for myself. I choose my clients, my projects, my terms. The company that fired me still pays me because they can't afford not to. The nephew who replaced me is answering phones somewhere. The CEO who humiliated me is writing LinkedIn posts about his next chapter. And I'm building an empire on my own terms. If you're watching this and someone has told you that you're too old, too experienced, too expensive, too set in your ways, understand this. Those words aren't describing your limitations. They're describing their fear. Fear that they can't control you. Fear that they can't replace you. Fear that when they try to erase you, the systems you built will remind them exactly who holds the keys. You're not redundant. You're inconvenient. And inconvenient people are the ones who change industries. I gave them a present they couldn't escape. And then I built myself a future they could never imagine. Do you agree? Share your thoughts in the comments. The full green file playlist's waiting, or discover other color files for more office revenge. See you in the next file.